She thought it was just another school event. She had no idea her whole world was about to walk through that door. Everyone in that room knew his rank. Only one woman in that room knew his heart.
Mommy, look! It's him!
He's here. I can't breathe. Then came the question that would change everything. How do you know him? And finally, I want to say, he had come home to receive an honor. He never expected to find the family he never knew he had.
She froze when the commander walked in. Everyone else in that auditorium saw a decorated officer. Sarah Bennett saw a ghost. If you have ever loved someone the world told you to forget, if you have ever carried a secret so heavy it aged you overnight, stay with this story until the very end. You will not see the ending coming, and if it moves you even a little, hit like and subscribe. Because stories like this one deserve to be told and shared and remembered. It was a bright Friday morning in the small town of Cedar Hollow, the kind of morning where the air still smelled faintly of autumn leaves and the local school was buzzing with excitement over its annual Veterans Appreciation Day. Sarah had been up since 5 ironing her daughter Emily's yellow dress, double-checking the little speech Emily had written about her hero, a father Emily had never met and Sarah rarely spoke of. Sarah worked as the school's part-time librarian and picked up shifts at the diner on Route 9 to make ends meet. She was 29 years old, but some mornings, looking in the mirror, she felt twice that age. Raising a daughter alone in a town where everyone knew everyone's business had not been easy, but she had built a quiet, steady life out of the wreckage of a past she rarely allowed herself to revisit. 12 years earlier, Sarah had been a bright-eyed 19-year-old working the front desk at her uncle's hardware store when a young enlisted soldier named David Miller walked in looking for boot polish and stayed for 2 hours talking about nothing and everything. David was 18 months from shipping out on his first deployment, but in the 6 months they had together, he became the center of her world. They talked about a future, a little house with a porch, a dog named Biscuit, Sunday pancakes. Then his unit was deployed overseas, and 3 months later, a letter arrived. Not from David. From his commanding officer's office, informing his family that Private Miller's convoy had been hit, and he was listed as missing, presumed killed in action. Sarah found out she was pregnant 4 weeks after that letter arrived. She never got the chance to tell David. She told herself for years that maybe it was better that way, that grieving a man you loved was hard enough without adding the weight of a truth he would never get to carry. She raised Emily alone, faced the whispers of a small town that loved to speculate, endured her own mother's disappointment, and built, brick by brick, a life she was quietly proud of. She told Emily her father had been a soldier who died a hero before she was born, and that much at least was not a lie, or so she believed. What Sarah did not know was that David Miller had survived, badly wounded, captured briefly, then rescued in a joint operation 8 months after the ambush. David had spent nearly 2 years in military hospitals overseas and stateside, undergoing surgeries, relearning how to walk, fighting through the kind of pain that reshapes a person from the inside out. When he was finally well enough to write, he sent letter after letter to Sarah's old address, but Sarah had moved twice in that time, first to her aunt's spare room and then into the small house on Miller Street, ironically enough, that she still lived in today. Every letter David sent came back stamped, "Return to sender." Eventually, on the advice of a well-meaning but misguided family friend who insisted Sarah had moved on and remarried, David stopped writing. He buried the hurt the way soldiers are trained to bury everything, and threw himself entirely into his career, rising steadily through the ranks over the next decade until he became one of the youngest commanders in his division, respected, decorated, and, to anyone who didn't know him closely, entirely alone by choice. Fate, or perhaps something less random than fate, brought Commander David Miller back to Cedar Hollow that Friday morning. His division had been asked to send a senior officer to the region for a series of Veterans Appreciation ceremonies at local schools, part of a larger community outreach initiative. David had said yes without thinking twice about the town's name. 12 years is a long time, and grief has a way of making a person believe the past is truly, safely behind them. When David stepped through the auditorium doors that morning in his dress uniform, medals catching the light, he was thinking about his prepared remarks, about getting through the ceremony and back to base by evening. He was not thinking about a hardware store or boot polish or a girl with warm brown eyes who used to laugh at all his terrible jokes. But when his gaze swept across the crowd and landed, almost by accident, on a woman in a blue blouse sitting beside a curly-haired little girl in a yellow dress, something in his chest seized so violently he nearly lost his place in his own thoughts. Sarah, for her part, had been half listening to the principal's introduction, mentally running through Emily's speech one more time, when the side doors opened and a hush rippled through the room the way it does when someone important enters. She looked up out of simple curiosity, and the booklet in her hands nearly slipped to the floor. 12 years had changed him. He was broader now, harder around the eyes, carrying himself with the weight of command instead of the looseness of youth. But it was him, the same crooked, almost smile line at the corner of his mouth, the same way he tilted his head slightly when he was trying to process something unexpected. Sarah's whole body went cold, then hot, then cold again. Her hands trembled. She could not breathe. Emily, sitting beside her, noticed her mother's sudden stillness. Immediately, children notice everything adults think they're hiding. She tugged at Sarah's sleeve and whispered, loud enough that the woman on Sarah's other side glanced over. "Mom? Mom, are you okay? You look like you saw a ghost. Do you know him?" No. Sarah could not answer. On stage, David had stopped mid-sentence in his opening remarks, his prepared notes forgotten entirely, his eyes locked on the little girl with the curly dark hair and the woman beside her whose face he would have recognized anywhere, in any lifetime, under any amount of scar tissue time had layered over his heart. The auditorium, sensing something was happening that had nothing to do with the ceremony, fell into an uncomfortable electric silence. The principal, sensing the officer had lost his train of thought, gently prompted him to continue, and David, trained for 12 years to function under pressure, managed to finish his remarks on autopilot, though every word felt like static in his own ears. The moment the ceremony broke for the reception in the gymnasium, David did not stay to shake hands with the mayor or pose for photographs with the school board. He crossed the auditorium floor with long, deliberate strides, ignoring the murmurs and stares, until he was standing directly in front of Sarah, who had risen on shaking legs, one protective hand resting on Emily's shoulder. "Sarah." His voice cracked on her name, a single word carrying 12 years of grief, confusion, and disbelief. "You're supposed to be dead." The words tumbled out of her before she could stop them, raw and unfiltered, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "I was supposed to write to you. I tried. I wrote for 2 years. Every letter came back," David said, his composed commander's exterior cracking wide open in front of a gymnasium full of strangers. "I was told you'd moved on, married someone else. I believed it because it was easier than believing you just disappeared." "I never got a single letter, David, not one. I thought you were dead. I have thought you were dead for 12 years. Sarah's voice shook as Emily, sensing the gravity of the moment even without fully understanding it, pressed closer against her mother's side, staring up at the tall stranger in uniform with wide, searching eyes. David's gaze dropped to Emily, and something shifted in his face. A dawning, terrifying, beautiful realization. He crouched slowly to Emily's eye level, careful, gentle, the way he might approach an unfamiliar and skittish animal, though his hands were visibly trembling. "Hi, I'm David. What's your name?" "Emily," she said, glancing up at her mother for permission before continuing. "Emily Rose Bennett. I'm 11. My dad was a soldier who died before I was born. My mom says he was a hero." David's eyes filled instantly, and he had to look away for a moment, jaw tightening, before he could speak again. "How old did you say you were?" 11. I'll be 12 in March. The math was not complicated, and every adult standing near enough to hear could do it. Whispers rippled outward through the gymnasium like a stone dropped in still water, Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She had never lied to her daughter. She genuinely believed David had died. But the truth, standing right in front of both of them in a dress uniform, rewrote everything Emily had ever been told about her father the following weeks, were in Sarah's words to her sister later that month, the hardest and most miraculous of my life. David requested and was granted an extended stay in the region to assist with the outreach program, though everyone from the school board to the diner regulars understood the real reason. He and Sarah spent long, careful hours untangling 12 years of misunderstanding, the intercepted letters that had genuinely gone to a wrong forwarding address after a clerical mix-up at his old base, compounded by a well-meaning cousin of Sarah's who had, in a moment of misplaced protectiveness, told a visiting army liaison that Sarah had moved on, never imagining the words would travel back to a grieving soldier fighting to hold himself together an ocean away. There were hard conversations. Sarah had built an entire identity around being a strong single mother who did not need anyone, and letting that armor down terrified her more than she wanted to admit. David had spent over a decade building a career as a shield against grief, and learning to be present, to be a father to a child who was almost a teenager, to be vulnerable with the woman he had loved and lost, and was now being asked to love again. None of it came easily or without stumbling. Emily, for her part, oscillated between wide-eyed excitement at gaining a father and a quiet, guarded wariness, unwilling to let herself hope too much in case this man vanished from her life the way he apparently already had once before, even if it wasn't his fault. But slowly, the way spring arrives after a long winter, not all at once, but in small, undeniable signs, the three of them began to build something real. David attended Emily's basketball games in civilian clothes so he wouldn't draw attention. He learned her favorite foods, her fear of thunderstorms, the way she chewed the end of her pencil when she was thinking hard about her homework. He and Sarah went to counseling together, not to rush into anything, but to learn how to trust again at a pace that honored everything they had both survived. Sarah's mother, who had once been so quick to judge her daughter's situation, wept openly the first time she watched David teach Emily how to properly salute, both of them laughing when Emily got it comically wrong 3 times in a row. 6 months after that Friday morning in the auditorium, David was formally reassigned to a base only 90 minutes from Cedar Hollow, close enough to be present for the ordinary, unglamorous, precious moments of fatherhood he had been robbed of for over a decade. School pickups, scraped knees, science fair projects, bedtime stories. He and Sarah did not rush toward a wedding or a fairy tale ending. They built something sturdier and slower, rooted in honesty this time instead of assumption, in communication instead of silence. On the 1-year anniversary of that Veterans Day ceremony, David returned to that same school auditorium, not in uniform this time, but in a simple gray suit, to watch Emily deliver a speech, not about a hero who died before she was born, but about her father, alive, imperfect, present, sitting in the 3rd row holding her mother's hand. If this story reminded you that it is never too late for the truth to find its way home, that love delayed is not always love denied, and that the family you're searching for might be standing closer than you think, let this be the story you remember the next time you feel like giving up on someone you have not stopped loving. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this touched you even a little, please like this video, subscribe for more stories like Sarah and David's, and leave a comment telling us which moment moved you most. We'll see you in the next story.